Welcome to the Pod of Inquiry, everyone, the podcast for human optimization and understanding. Today's guest is Dan Stachofsky from Essential Energy. If you're having any ideas about what happens with EMF and is it really a real consideration as far as impairment of human health and physiology, you need to tune into this conversation because today you are going to hear the best explanation of the effects of EMF on human physiology that I've ever heard. And I think this will give you some clarity, and then you're going to get some really exciting stuff because our guest, Dan, has figured out a way to mitigate this with his biophotonic plates. Very interesting stuff, compelling objective data, and it really takes this EMF, in my mind, out of the woo-woo land and into something that we really need to be considering and integrating mitigation as much as we possibly can. So please enjoy this conversation that I have with Dan Stachofsky.
Welcome to the Pod of Inquiry. Ready for some thought-provoking cerebral whipping and the destruction of ridiculous medical dogma? Want to shift those stale, moldy old paradigms? Well then, don that thinking cap of yours, get down in the cave, and join our host, Dr. Stephen Barrett, for this week's episode. Let's start spelunking.
Welcome to the Pod of Inquiry, everyone. My guest today is Dan Stachofsky, and he is the owner of Essential Energy. And we're going to talk about some pretty cool stuff, which I'm still, actually, to be very honest, I'm still confused about some of the physiological effects and what things are true and are not true. And I think by having this conversation, it's going to delineate a lot of really important things that you all have been thinking about as well, being biohackers. Dan, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Dr. Barrett. It's great to be here.
So tell everybody how you got started in this, because I think that story about your daughter is really interesting.
Yeah, well, it is personal. My daughter was born premature, probably not uncommon to a lot of people, but she actually ended up developing a primary immune deficiency and some brain injury early on. And through the course of that, we worked with the Children's Hospital, incredible practitioners. But even though we made a lot of success in a lot of areas in her life and really helped bring her neurological function and everything, the immune system, the adaptive immune system, really struggled to come on board. In fact, it never really did for her. So we spent the first 7 years of her life really fighting infections on a regular basis. And she had a lot of rounds of antibiotics. She'd go to the hospital every 3 to 4 months. Super taxing for her. It stunted her growth because as she's fighting off those infections, then her growth curve would shut down. And as her body's working on finding the energy to fight the infection. So my wife and I, we were really trying all these things to figure out how do we help her live just a healthy, stable life. And we end up kind of starting to go down that whole functional alternative route of medicine. And I think the first, I call it my gateway drug, was essential oils. At the time, this was close to 10, 12 years ago, had never really explored them. I thought they were weird. I didn't understand it. But then I started to discover how amazing these oils are and how, like, the intricacy, the depth of nature and how nature can be so healing. And it was just this, like, my worldview around medicine and health just started to shift dramatically. Because I had to wrestle with the fact that here is this essential oil that, like, if you take the rose essential oil, here's a plant that we all know, stop and smell the roses, has a scent, a frequency. Then you can now inject, you can take it in through an oil that someone had to distill a whole room full of rose petals to make an ounce. And yet the power for it to heal is tremendous. And so all of a sudden I had to deal with the fact that I'm not just chemical. There's this, like, electromagnetic side of me, this frequency side that my body's interacting with nature and nature back and forth. And how could this help solve the deal with my daughter Jane? And that led me down this path of realizing that the environment that we live in is not the same that we grew up in or was 100 years ago. Things are changing, and it was, I mean, right close to home for me. And so I had to find a way. How do I create an environment in both, not just around Jane, but inside her body to help her immune system have the strength to fight this off, and to fight off an infection. And
So,
that doorway really sent me down this path.
so when we talk about EMF, explain to everybody what EMF is because it's around us everywhere we walk and talk.
Yeah. And I have a couple slides that might be good to show, just because I think this concept is, if we're new to electricity and electromagnetic fields, being having something to look at can help with that.
Let's get
Um,
into that 1 second. I want to make a comment about something that I came across just a couple of days ago. And I had watched a documentary on earthing or grounding. And
yep.
what a lot of people don't realize is we are really electrical, we're electrical beings. And I think it
Yeah.
was Becker that wrote The Body Electric way back in the mid 80s, which is a fantastic book. I'd recommend everybody read it. But we are electrical. There's no doubt about it. I mean, everybody knows that from a peripheral nerve standpoint, nerve conduction, velocities, all of these different things. But when it comes to EMF, it seems there's this abyss going to, from the fundamental understanding that we are electrical in nature, but how does this other electrical thing affect us? So I
Yeah.
came across some thermography of an individual that was pretty inflamed. And then they did the thermography after about 25, 30 minutes of him grounding. And the thermograms were totally, I mean, you could just see it. It was very objective, which I thought, well, this is really cool because it's one thing for people to just to try to grab onto a concept and say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But when you can see objective findings like an MRI or a thermograph, those are pretty impressive objective findings. So I just wanted to comment that when you get into your talk on this, there are ways to measure this stuff. And I'm sure you're going to get into that, which is really important for understanding.
I know, yeah, you have to be able to measure it. Though, what we have to, as we get into this, we're going to realize that uh, it's not your typical ways of measuring health may not always capture the electrical side. It's invisible. You don't see it, you don't smell it, but it's affecting us. And so we have to look at the bioresonance, or how it's affecting the function of our cells, the mitochondria, so your heart rate variability,
Right.
as well as just the biophotonic emission. So how are your cells functioning is a big piece of this. And the EMFs, the electromagnetic fields, there's natural and unnatural. The natural ones are for example, from the sun. Fritz Albert Popp, one of the leading fathers of biophotonics, he he says we live in a sea of light, and that every plant or person, every living system produces an emission of light. So we don't always think about that, and it gets into the kind of the real periphery of human existence, right? Of who are we? What's our existence about? We're interacting with light. I mean, I think if you come from a perspective that we were created, we in a garden, or just before all this electricity, we were in nature, we were walking in nature. You talk about grounding. When you're barefoot or you hug a tree, I mean, these concepts that maybe we are foreign to us, but when we connect with nature, uh, nature was designed to heal us. Sunlight, one of the
Right.
best nutrients that we could have. Um, and yet today with the EMF, it's nature's getting corrupted. It's polluted. They
Right.
call it electropollution, electrodensity. If you can picture what air smog would look like over a major city, well, if we could see the EMF, the non-native EMF, the unnatural, that's what it looks like. It's just pollution, and that puts actually builds up voltage on the cell walls. And when our bodies are operating in the hertz range, 2 to 10 hertz or so, that extra voltage is what leads to a lot of cellular dysfunction. And that can lead to oxidative stress. It can lead to the voltage gated calcium channels malfunctioning, letting in too much calcium into the cell. And then you get too many free radicals and mitochondrial dysfunction. And pretty soon, you're just you don't have the energy. Your batteries, your tank is empty at the end of the day.
So
Um,
Dan, let me interrupt you because I think you said something real important there about you said 2 to 10 hertz. Is that
mhm.
the natural frequency that normal human physiology functions pretty well in, and then all of these other things are super maximal, or I'm
Right.
misunderstanding that?
That's my understanding. I mean, the
Yeah.
range there may fluctuate to up
Hmm.
to 50 hertz, but it just depends on the organ or the system
Right.
that you're measuring. But it's definitely in the hertz range. Whereas you hold your cell phone, you're holding something that's putting off 2.4 gigahertz or 3.1 gigahertz, which can be measured with a radio frequency EMF meter.
Right.
So you're dealing with something that's millions of times stronger than what nature is operating at.
Right.
Earth has a heartbeat or a frequency called the Schumann resonance. It
Right.
was always considered to be 7.83 hertz. What's interesting is that some people who've been measuring the Schumann resonance, they notice it does fluctuate. And there's a theory that it fluctuates based on how to help keep the Earth in balance from an
Mhm.
electrical and magnetic perspective. So you've got the sun, activity can go up and down. We were in a solar minimum for a while. Well, it's starting to act up again. We're getting more aurora, more, the northern lights
Right.
coming and getting more of these. So as it gets more active, maybe the Schumann resonance kind of acts to balance that. Well, what effect does all the frequencies from electricity have on that magnetic field? There's an amazing book called The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg, and he goes into the history of electrification of the world back to 1740. I mean, back when they were just doing static, like electrical, like static electricity, right? Where they'd have a Leyden jar, they rub it,
Right.
they get a static charge and go shock somebody. I mean,
Right.
just like you and I growing up, we'd do that with our socks on the carpet.
Right.
Well, that much shock was causing doctors in the 1700s to identify a condition called neurasthenia, which was an allergic reaction to electricity. And they were getting numb arms, numb faces, uh, heart palpitations, anxiety. The list was starting to grow back in the 1700s, and today that list is almost the exact same list, although it's grown for what we would consider be electro hypersensitivity, or for some people who would be clinically diagnosed with neurasthenia, which is this condition, which is when they're EMF sensitive.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned nature too. I mean, you can go back and I recall when I was teaching some courses on peripheral nerve stimulation, which is electricity. There were people that Scribonius Largus, I think in about like 20 AD or BC, would talk about the folks that would stick their feet in ponds in near the ocean where these torpedo fish were, and they would
Hmm.
get the electricity off of them, and that actually helped them, medicate certain different conditions. I probably was peripheral neuropathy at that point in time. So I guess the point is, like all things, electricity, if it's used in the proper dosage and frequency, is vital for life. And if it is super maximal and the frequency is, you're going to get some type of aberrant effect on cellular function.
Yeah, you mentioned Bob Becker earlier in his research. His book, he researched how salamanders regenerate their limbs.
Right.
And it was just a millivolt difference in the voltage between their cells and what they could regenerate versus what humans could. And he actually goes into he worked for DARPA and was researching how could he help people in the military regenerate limbs and things. And he figured it out. and it was all about voltage. It was about electricity. Um, and so it doesn't take much. It's very minimal. So now that we live in this world that is extremely electrified, we run into serious issues. In the 70s, they had a study that looked at the effect of power lines, just, the electrical power
Right.
lines that run down the street,
Right.
what that effect has on the ionosphere. They
Hmm.
were able to measure the effect of when they put up a large transmission line, they could measure that effect on the ionosphere. That's several miles. I mean, what is it,
Right.
30 to 100 miles up or so, right? So the atmosphere is affected by this. Now, your EMF meter picks up electrical fields and magnetic fields, and I can walk up to those transmission lines, and I do this all the time on people's farms or on their homes when they want to see how bad their pollution is. And I can show that meter, and I can walk a distance away, and the magnetic field will drop off. Maybe that's 500 meters or so, and then I'll go uh, further, maybe half a mile, and the electrical field will drop. But clearly, that meter isn't showing the real effect if they were able to measure a change in the ionosphere miles away just from a
Right.
transmission line. So, this is affecting all of nature, people, plants, animals, the soil. And so, I think this is one of the biggest uh, macro crises that we've made upon ourselves uh, in maybe human history. I don't know. I don't know what we did back in the day, but at least in the last couple hundred years, many scientists, there's a bioinitiative report produced in 2012 saying this is the worst uh, thing that we could do to human health is to proliferate wireless communication unchecked without any biological standards or testing done.
Before we continue with this great discussion, I just want to take a quick break to acknowledge this week's sponsor. I'm constantly exploring new avenues to enhance well being and address any health concerns. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to an exciting supplement called STEM Regen, which I take daily and genuinely believe could revolutionize your health journey as well. STEM Regen stands out as a game changer in the realm of wellness. Crafted from 5 potent plant extracts, it boasts a remarkable ability to stimulate the release of your body's own stem cells from your red bone marrow. Why is this significant? Well, stem cells are the superheroes of our body's natural repair system. They possess the extraordinary capacity to morph into various cell types, aiding in tissue regeneration and repair. As we age, the quantity of circulating stem cells in our system reduces significantly, impairing our body's ability to heal and rejuvenate itself effectively. STEM Regen steps in to counter this decline by kickstarting the release of stem cells into circulation, thereby bolstering your body's innate repair mechanisms. Once unleashed into your bloodstream, these mobilized stem cells actively seek out areas of damage or injury, initiating the healing process. By incorporating STEM Regen into your daily routine, you're essentially empowering your body to tap into its own regenerative prowess more efficiently. I firmly believe that STEM Regen could be a valuable addition to your wellness regimen, especially if you're seeking to fortify overall health and vitality, accelerate tissue repair, or expedite recovery from injury or illness. This first of its kind stem cell mobilizer is changing the game in regenerative medicine. Don't wait to unleash your body's innate healing capabilities. Visit stemregen.co/Dr. Steven, that's with a PH, and use the code SBPOD to get a 15% discount off your first order of STEM Regen. Very interesting. Well, you said you had some slides to show us, and I'm
Yeah.
anxious to see that.
All right, let's jump into it. So some of these slides we kind of already hit on, so I'll run through these kind of quick. But the story of what we're dealing with really goes back to the electromagnetic, kind of the basis of life. And Albert Einstein said everything in life is vibration. Nikola Tesla, I don't have this slide, but he said if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of frequency, vibration, and energy. I think those are I think that's the quote. Sorry,
Sure.
mind block. But here's what happens is Dr. May Wan Ho, she was the director of the Institute of Science and Society, says our bodies have a system of communication that relays critical information between cells at a molecular level using light or electromagnetic resonance. This system governs all chemical actions and reactions, indeed, life itself. I think that's a really important take home
Yep.
for us is that we're talking about something that is deep into who we are, how we function, and affects everything. This is a I consider foundational. When I was trying to find a solution for Jane, I wanted a root, I want to know what the root cause of health dysfunction and healthy function was. And then I came across this quote and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like the light went on. When that system suffers interferences and loss and loses coherence, we suffer illness. So that primary immune deficiency wasn't actually the root cause. That was a symptom of something deeper.
This is pretty analogous to the gut microbiome, which is something nobody even talked about before 15 years ago. And now we're starting to talk about this system and how it affects
Yeah.
all of the physiological systems.
Right. And as we get our heads around it, I think so much starts to make sense. It fills in so many gaps of people who are struggling for years to find an answer for fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome or Lyme's disease. The answer may be that their body doesn't have the electrical energy, the mitochondrial function to give them the boost they need. It's like there's a hurdle that their system has to get over to find health, and they're struggling to get over that hurdle. And it may very well be that the EMF in the environment, the blue light toxicity, that affects the eyes and the hormone product, all of that, it could be what's holding them back. So Dr. Deborah Davis, Nobel Prize winner, she was on the committee that helped uh, Congress ban smoking on airplanes. She's now turned her attention towards EMF, especially EMF in children. She heads up the Environmental Health Trust, EHT.org. I encourage you guys to check it out and support it. She says, I think I have a moral obligation to tell the truth and see that it's told clearly and broadly. And that's what I'm trying to do. We have airbags and seatbelts for cars. We need that for cell phones. That's what she says. We need boundaries. Um, and here's why. You talked about thermography.
Right.
Here's what you were talking about. Putting up a cell phone to a 5-year-old, that radiation fills the brain. 10-year-old, okay, the brain is getting a little more structured, and it's still 80% of the brain is being zapped by, and these pictures were taken probably 10, 15 years ago. You do it today, and the phones are so strong that these pictures would be even worse today. I tell people that we think of a cell phone as like one antenna. There's multiple antennas. You have the antenna for that picks up the 3G, that picks up the 4G, the 5G, the GPS, the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth, the
Right.
near field communication. It even has a radio frequency. So I mean, there are multiple antennas that are zapping us. Um, Here's another picture of what it looks like. So we're putting a microwave up to our head and zapping us. And if we're doing this to our children, I mean, this is an old phone from the early 2000s, not even a smartphone. If we're doing this to our children, what are we doing to help them develop? And how is this affecting their development? It affects fertility, reproductive organs, bone marrow. What forms in the bone marrow? Stem cells.
Stem cells. Right.
So now how are we affecting this? It's pretty significant. What effect do we have on fetuses, babies in utero? Dr. Klinghardt would say that uh, he most cases of autism, he says he roots back to the mothers, and they were in a high EMF environment. Maybe they're putting their laptops or their tablets on their belly as a little laptop stand. But he says clinically, I think there's a connection between high EMF in utero and uh, ADHD and autism.
So, Dan, one of the things I have to ask you now is,
Hmm.
you look, there's a lot of confusing literature. I think a lot of it is gaslighting, like they did back with the smoking, where they were telling Congress and the Senate that it's perfectly fine, it's healthy, and doctors, in fact, the pulmonologists smoke camels and yada yada. Well, if you look at the some of the current literature, for example, an article in Nature in recently in 2025, they talk about the fact that this is completely safe because 90% or 95% of the EMF is absorbed by the skin and it gets no deeper than that. And then you show these pictures that it's just totally contrary. It's kind of like it's pretty hard to say that it's not going through, just it's just going to and maybe a little bit through the skin when you're getting all that lit up. I mean,
Right.
that's I mean, that's problematic for me. And I'm trying to read this stuff and get into it and go, well, what's real and what's not? Well, looking at what you just showed there, it just kind of shows that that article in Nature probably wasn't so truthful.
I think there's so many different ways to talk about this. I think there's a playbook. If you look at the way the tobacco industry did their playbook with cigarettes, they would every time a study would come out showing that it was harmful or led to lung cancer, the industry would come out with a study that would contradict it, and it gave them the license to say there's contradictory information or
Hmm.
it's not affirmative, it's not well established. And so I think there's that playbook going on. But even if I take their study and at face value, if it's going into the skin isn't that the body's largest organ?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
how
it
isn't that
is.
still affecting us? I mean,
Right.
is it getting to the fascia? I mean, they're trying to avoid the what's coming, which is a huge awakening and deep awareness that we have all silently been led as sheep kind of to the slaughter or frogs in a boiling pot. While we love this technology and it makes a lot of things in life convenient, it has come with serious side effects. If you go into your owner's manual for your phone on about page 300, there's they say don't hold the phone within an inch of the body. They talk about the dangers of radio frequency and EMF from the phone, and that's their get out of jail free card because if you sue them for health, they'll say, "Well, didn't you read your owner's manual? I mean, we warned you." So they and the telecommunication industry is not innocent in any of this. There was a big study done in the 1990s. Dr. George Carlo headed that up, funded by the telecom industry. This is I think, the only industry funded study in history for the telecoms. And I mean, research Dr. George Carlo and his study because it's a fascinating story. He found that it led to breast cancer, it led to brain cancer. He saw that. He reported it to the telecommunication board, and they buried it. And then Tom Wheeler, who was head of that telecommunication board, became head of the FCC under President Obama, and is famous for saying it's not if we're going to do 5G, it's when and how fast it's going to happen. Well, they knew this was going to cause problems. And so, but there's a lot of money behind it. There's a lot of demand. And on one hand, I understand there is a national security perspective where if other nations are doing it and we are, I mean, there's this
Right.
industry. I worked for in the software industry when I kind of started to have my awakening, and we were building the cloud, artificial intelligence, AI, IoT, and the Internet of Things, all this driving more and more use. And industry is saving billions of dollars every year because of this technology, but there's a huge cost to pay.
Yeah, but the problem is the cost is the ultimate cost is maybe 5 years, 10 years, 30 years down the line.
Right.
And the say it's very similar to the smoking issue. You don't develop uh, the consequences the day you start lighting up. There's a latency there.
Yeah.
So,
People liken the electricity or the EMF and our body's response to that as like an allergic reaction.
right,
Again, that term neurasthenia, which is exactly what that means. Well, if it's an allergic reaction, that's why everybody has a slightly different response. That's why, Stephen, you may not technically notice anything with a cell
right,
phone or Wi-Fi. You might think, oh no, it's not bothering me. Whereas your next door neighbor, she may not be able to leave the house unless she's wearing protective Faraday clothing because it will send her for 3 to 4 or 5 days of being extremely sick and not able to get out of bed for a number of days just from being exposed. I mean, there's people who can't. They have to make special doctor appointments with a clinic to go in after hours so they can shut off the LED or fluorescent lights and just lower that EMF toxicity just to get their teeth worked on, say, or get a chiropractor appointment.
right.
So there are people who are much more serious about. I think they say the number is about 3 to 5% of Americans are severely affected by EMF. Another 30 to 40% are moderate or mild, and then the rest of us may just not know it or we don't see it. But when you start to go deeper and look at the blood and how the blood is affected by this, that's when I think the lid comes off and all of a sudden everything's exposed. There was just a couple months ago, somebody finally was able to get an article published that showed a study of if you hold a cell phone for 5 minutes, that changes the structure of the blood. It
Wow.
goes into what they call rouleau or sticky
Hmm.
blood,
Right.
just 5 minutes.
Wow.
And we know that rouleau is a bad situation. You don't want that for your blood.
No.
It needs to be round and bright. Uh, and that's because I think the voltage on those cell walls have changed, and now they're clumping versus repelling each other. They don't flow freely. Well, voltage is electricity. So what's causing that? Well, that magnetic field, the electrical field, all the radio frequencies from that phone, they all interact with it. And if it's just one cell phone, what's happening when you're at work and you're in an office with hotspots, Wi-Fi, and multiple people around your office, your desk with phones, or you go to an event like a church or a concert, and there's hundreds of phones around you.
And now, a message from our sponsor. Well, folks, if you are over 40 and you are not using a supplement to augment nitric oxide production, you should really rethink that. This molecule is absolutely imperative to the health of so many bodily functions, not the least of which is cardioprotection. If you have any question on nitric oxide, I suggest that you register with Approved Medical Solutions and begin receiving their educational emails. I never miss a day of nitric oxide supplementation. That's how important it is. Long overdue, Approved Medical Solutions created the only nitric oxide replenishment formula without oxalates. Approved Medical Solutions does not use beet, spinach, or arginine. Approved Medical Solutions is proud to offer our audience their oxalate-free nitric oxide formula. If you are not a healthcare provider, you can still get started by going to approvedmedicalsolutions.com and use the code SBarrett at checkout, and you'll receive a 10% medical discount savings. You can register to receive educational emails without any purchase. For licensed practitioners, you too can go to approvedmedicalsolutions.com and get registered today. They have unique bundles for all of the full-fledged spelunkers of the Pod of Inquiry. Use Pod of Inquiry at checkout after registration. Here's a little secret. If you order their testing strips and test every patient for a few clinic days, you will see every one of them be deficient. When they see this result, they will want you to start them up immediately. Now, thanks to approved medical solutions, you can give them the best care without the worry of oxalates.
Constantly, right? So, the stickers on the phone, I think, are a misguided approach to maybe mitigating this, because it may do something for your one phone, but what is it doing for everything else, or your neighbor's Wi-Fi? And so if we're in a sea of light and our body lives in that, we need to find a way to change that equation in our favor. Because we could easily get into a victim mindset here,
Right, right.
and
Well,
that's not what we're about. Like,
well,
no,
well, this,
we're victorious. We can overcome.
right,
We can take control of our health and our life. And then that's what your podcast is all about,
right,
is like exposing maybe these bigger challenges, but then realizing that, okay, there are ways, like earthing and supplements like boron, selenium. Like, there's things we can do, uh, and I don't know if we want to go down that path quite yet, but because there's maybe some more that we want to learn around just what the EMFs are. But um, this is a bigger. I guess the point is, this is kind of an uber topic, right? This is a
right.
macro thing, and sometimes that's hard to get your head around until you really delve into it.
Well, I think this is a very important topic from several aspects. One is that it's still relatively misunderstood, and the ramifications of it are not readily apparent to the general public. And
Yeah.
that we have been gaslit on this thing for sure. Uh, and it isn't going to get better. I mean, the chances that our universe or our planet has less EMF in 10 years than it does now, I would think would be infinitesimally small,
Correct.
because technology and money and all of these factors. But it kind of reminds me of that episode, or that series Better Call Saul, where his brother, who was the attorney, do you remember this? Where
Sure.
he was one of these super sensitive guys, and he had to disconnect everything. He unplugged his electric ovens and stoves and cook on a gas burner and all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, that's obviously the extreme, but it illustrates that there are people in the world that suffer greatly. And maybe I mean, this sounds pretty whacked, but maybe because they suffer greatly, they're acknowledging it and taking measures to mitigate it, where the majority of us are just walking around in this milieu of EMF pollution, and we're just like, everything's good, blah, blah, blah. And so
Yeah.
I know we're gonna get to what you do here in a little bit as far as trying to mitigate these things, and I'm anxious to get to that. But before we go there, is there anything more you want to show on the slide deck?
Yeah, there
Okay,
is actually. I think it'll help bring this to forward a little bit more. I'm going to skip forward. Here's
there it
yeah,
is. Yeah,
Bob, and no doubt, greatest polluting element in Earth's environment, which is funny because we think of like air smog, or CO2 from cars being a pollutant. Have you ever thought about electricity as being a pollutant?
no,
I mean, it's a mind shift. Fritz Allerpot. This is interesting. This is a quote that stuck with me. Every uh, every cell has 100,000 chemical reactions per second, and each cell requires the energy of a biophoton to function normally. So we have what, 50 to 70 trillion cells in the body. So that's
it's a
quadrillion
yeah,
chemical reactions a second, which is what Becker was talking about in his book. Like, we are walking like electrical chemical factories that it's if you I mean, there's the force of an atomic bomb if it was any larger in capacity, but because it's so minute, it's at the nuclear level, we don't see it that way. But it needs a biophoton, and the environment has changed. It used to be people were dying from, scurvy, measles, tuberculosis, teeth and
right.
worms, fright, lethargy, grief. Well, where's heart disease and cancer and diabetes, and metabolic issues? What role are they playing in healthcare today? They're off the chart, and I think a lot of it is due to this EMF. And here's why: present exposure to man-made microwaves is about a million billion times greater than natural exposure to those frequencies. And you can see it. What's happening? The first mile above the earth is now filled with so much EMF since 1900. It's just exploding, and you see it. We see it in the last 5 years. Over a million 5G cell towers have been put up, and majority of the millions of 4G towers have been upgraded. Not
Hmm.
only that, we have the 10,000 or more brand new communication satellites that have been launched, and they're launching more all the time. And it's a race. But our immune system is massively underrated as an instrument of good health. It's severely hampered by the environment we've created. Klinghardt says clinical proof that MS, ALS, Alzheimer's, ASD5, all these super tricky, difficult conditions can't get better unless patients create a low EMF environment at home. In other words, you can't get healthy in the environment you got sick in. And then what else has happened over this time? As these sources of electrodensity have been um, invented and then released and deployed, what's happened? Almost every single time a major pandemic or epidemic has followed the release of this technology. The two great comparisons look at what happened with the radio towers in 1940 and then followed by the Spanish flu. And then look what happened in 2019, 2020 with 5G and the communication satellites, and then our pandemic. So those things, we just want to look at these and say there's clearly a connection. Backing it up, EMF is an electromagnetic wave. There's an electrical field and a magnetic field. We have an electromagnetic spectrum. Other people, you could also call this the light spectrum. There's a visible light, and then you've got the ionizing form of this which is UV, X-ray, gamma rays, and then you have the non-ionizing, which is extremely low frequencies up to the radio, microwave, and infrared. Well, for the longest time, they would say, well, non-ionizing isn't harmful because it doesn't heat the cells and cause DNA damage.
Right.
And we know that X-rays, gamma rays, UV does create heat, and so it's ionizing. But we found now that that's just not the case. That there's two different pathways that lead to the same problem. It creates DNA damage, creates mitochondrial dysfunction, reactive oxidative species, and oxidative stress. So we've got sunlight, it's natural. We've got biophotons. These might be new topics, but it's worth investigating and learning, because when we think about health, this is what we're talking about right now, is like the source of this. Here's a slide that kind of shows the hertz by system. Your eyeballs 20 to 90 hertz. Your head is
Right.
20 to 30 hertz, can be measured. So it's a magnitude more when you hold that cell phone in your hand. And if you know about acupuncture, um, you put that phone in your hand, you're hitting all the internal systems too through the nervous system. Um, so Schumann resonance, we talked about that. Non-native EMFs, they come from the cell towers, power lines, microwaves, any motor, even the alternator on your car or the motor in your refrigerator can lead to EMF stress. LED lights, blue lights from the screens. Some people kind of visualize Wi-Fi looking like this. But this is what frequencies. There's millions of frequencies around us all the time, passing through us. But when we have non-polarized sunlight, it's healthy because it creates a net zero voltage on the cell. So the cell can still operate in that 5 to 10 to 50 hertz. Whereas from the EMF, and it's kind of dark, but there's a picture of a phone in the one there. This
Right.
this creates polarized light that actually accumulates on the cell, and that's what leads to this dysfunction. And you can see you get voltage gated calcium activation, which is calcium overload. You've got the ROS overproduction, mitochondrial DNA mutations, signal disruption, melatonin suppression. The list kind of goes on. And so really what ends up happening, you just have, your tank's drained at the end of the day. And I love this term, malillumination. John Ott coined that term. And we understand malnutrition when it comes to food, but today we have to look at our environment. Are we getting the illumination, the light that is healthy? Are we getting enough of that? Or are we indoors? I think they say 90% of Americans are indoors so much that it's actually creating malillumination. So we need to get outside, smell the roses. Lack of biophotons create a communication system breakdown, neurodegenerative diseases. See, these things it links back to so many things. I think this is like an existential threat and crisis that's fundamental. We want to have a nice structured form of blood and water, but around EMF, like that study showed, 5 minutes with your cell phone, it's going to deplete it. It's going to unstructure it. And so it's going to affect your circadian rhythm, how you sleep, how you detox, how your body naturally functions throughout the night and resets and rejuvenates. You're not getting into that deep delta sleep because the stress level on the cells is too high. So you're anxious or you're restless. If it takes you more than 15 minutes to fall asleep, it could be the EMFs. If you're waking up at 3 a.m, it could be that the EMFs have created an environment in your body where the parasites are active, and so it's waking you up. If you and so we want to create good, healthy EMF hygiene, and we'll get into that. I'm just running through these slides because I want you to know and your audience to see, like, there is a lot of published data. There's tens of thousands of published articles. Nitric oxide is a big deal right now. A lot of people are talking about it, but it's inhibited by EMF and all the. There's a book by Dr. Mercola called EMF, and he kind of goes into all this. Or Dr. Martin Paul from he's a professor emeritus from Washington State University. He's super qualified. He's a biophysicist and he has 2 biochemists and a biophysicist. So he's got both degrees, I believe. Anyway, he broke down what's kind of happening, and he said 5G is the stupidest human experiment ever invented by man because of what it'll do to our brains and our DNA and our overall health. And you mentioned, this is personal, because Jane, she passed away 3.5 years ago. And as a family, as a parent, that just continues to echo. But it's also, I think, why we're talking today, because if I don't know what if I had known about these things earlier? What if I had been able to help change her environment earlier? We were blessed to find solutions and start building these solutions early, about midway through her life when she was about 7 or 8. And we were blessed with many years of stability that really started to happen overnight. But I want other people to know about it sooner than later, because there's a lot of suffering going on. I was just talking to someone this morning who says she's spending about $14,000 to $20,000 a year just to try to stay healthy, just to function normal.
As you know, I'm passionate about learning new ways to address health concerns. Moreover, before I recommend any treatment or supplement, I always try it on myself. Today, I want to share my experience with Troche. I have investigated other phytocannabinoid formulas and found that, in general, they were not consistent or reliable in their results. What impressed me about the Troche delivery technology is that each rapid-release tab is engineered to provide fast-acting, long-lasting, reliable delivery of phytocannabinoids to support your health and well-being. Many physicians understand the importance of using phytocannabinoids for physical discomfort, sleep issues, and mood. But if the formula is not reliable, most patients will give up. never experiencing the real benefits? I put this to the test on myself and actually tracked my progress. This graph shows my results for reducing stress. Troche is so serious about how well their product works, they partnered with People Science to provide the Troche Tracker health assessment application that lets you monitor your progress and works with you to accomplish your wellness goals. If you are a patient, click the link below and the patient button to register for Troche Tracker. Assess your baseline health metrics and receive a free Troche sample in addition to getting preferred patient pricing on all products. If you are a clinician interested in adding Troche to your practice, click the link below and then the clinician button to register for a wholesale affiliate account or go to the link above. I hope you all enjoyed today's show and got some truly empowering knowledge out of it. You can always follow up on anything we talked about in the show notes found at our website, podofinquiry.com. If you think you might have tickled just a few neurons inside that cerebral cortex, please spread the word to your friends and colleagues and tell them that they need to get spelunking. Also, if you can take a minute to leave a review on your podcast provider of choice, and especially Apple Podcasts, that would greatly help the show and be so appreciated, provided it's positive. And if not, then just keep your pie hole shut and stay down in that cave. Let's keep spelunking.
This podcast is designed for informational purposes only and does not constitute any medical or surgical consulting advice or imply a development of any physician-patient relationship. The opinions of guests who are featured on the show are not necessarily the opinions of Dr. Barrett or the production team. This podcast is owned solely by Barrett Medical and Surgical Media, LLC. While the show is highly oriented for physicians and healthcare providers, anyone interested in the improvement of human performance and understanding will find this a welcome goblet to sip from or guzzle. However, no representation or warranties are made in any way whatsoever on this podcast for any products, techniques, or other things discussed. Invited guests are not vetted by the Pod of Inquiry for their qualifications and may have a direct or indirect financial interest in what they present and discuss on the show. The Pod of Inquiry disclaims any responsibility from anything taken from the show and used personally or professionally. It is a responsibility of the listener to perform their own due diligence prior to the implementation of any ideas, products, techniques, or anything talked about on the show.